The black silence of space was broken by fire and screams as the last stronghold of the coalition of free worlds fell under the crushing force of the Drex Dominion, and on the burning bridge of the flagship, Commander Lyra's hands trembled over. The controls as enemy ships filled the sky like a swarm of shadows, each one larger and deadlier than the last, and the once bright capital city below was nothing but an ocean of molten ruins. Her crew were shouting damage reports and casualty counts, but none of it mattered now because she could see the truth on the tactical map. Every defense line shattered, every ally gone, and there was no hope left except one desperate act she could still try before the Drex finished them. Lyra slammed her, palm on the emergency transmitter, a relic of an ancient coalition design capable of sending a coded signal across uncharted space. She did not know who would hear it, or even if anyone would understand it. But she had no choice. Her voice cracked. As she spoke, the message into the device. Our worlds are burning. Our people are dying. Whoever hears this, save us before the darkness takes everything. And as the signal was sent, the flagship shuddered under another blast. Warning sirens howled, and a section of the hull tore away into the void. And Lyra closed her eyes, thinking perhaps this final call would drift into nothingness and be forgotten. But somewhere far away on a frozen mountainside in Alaska, an old listening post buried in snow, and ice caught the signal, its long dormant antennae turning to catch the faint whisper from the stars. And inside a dimly lit control room, two operators stared at the translation scrolling across their screen, eyes widening with disbelief. At first, thinking it was some prank or strange interference, until the words burned clear on the monitor. Our worlds are burning. Whoever hears this, save us. And the timestamp showed. It was live within seconds. The message was routed to the United States. Space Command, where generals and analysts gathered around the table, the grainy visuals attached to the transmission showed alien cities burning under waves of fire, Drex warships carving through defenses without slowing, and the faces of alien civilians looking up as if begging the camera for mercy. President Taylor joined the emergency feed from the White House, her voice steady but her eyes sharp as she asked for options. One general said, "We cannot engage a force we know nothing about." Another warned, "If they can burn their worlds, they can burn ours too." A scientist pointed to the alien ships on the footage, explaining that their power signatures made human weapons look like sticks and stones. But Admiral James Walker leaned forward, his voice low and steady, and said, "If we wait, they will come here. They always come here." And in that room filled with uncertainty, his words carried the weight of a decision no one wanted to make. Back on the flagship, Lyra could barely stand as her crew fought to keep the ship together when suddenly the comms officer shouted, "Commander, they've traced the signal," and her blood ran cold because she knew what that meant. The Drex would follow it to whoever had answered the call and far across the void. The same truth struck the minds of Earth's leaders like ice. If the Drex had traced the signal, Earth had already been marked as the next target. The emergency meeting turned into chaos, some calling to shut down all communications, others urging immediate military mobilization. But the choice came down to a single vote. The president finally said, "If we are the next target, then we do not wait for the fire to come to us. We meet it head-on," and her words sent ripples of urgency through. The command chain orders were issued within minutes. Project Aegis, the most advanced fleet humanity had ever assembled but never used in combat, was activated. Crews rushed to ships docked in orbital yards. Weapons that had been tested only in simulations were armed and in the cold, dark above Earth steel, and light began to gather for war while out beyond Neptune. Sensors picked up the faint but growing signature of incoming ships too far for clear visuals, but close enough to trigger alarms across every system on Earth. And in that moment, a quiet understanding settled over everyone from the commanders in orbit to the workers in shipyards, to the families watching news feeds. This was no rescue mission. This was survival. And as Lyra's flagship finally split apart under Drex fire, Her last thoughts were of the unknown warriors who might answer her call, and the hope that they would fight with the fury her people never had the chance to unleash. And somewhere in the dark of space, the Drex fleet adjusted its course, the engines flaring with cold blue fire as they set their path straight for the little blue world that had just entered their sights. The cold emptiness beyond Pluto was silent, except for the low hum of reactors deep inside. The lead ship of Project Aegis, where Captain Marcus Hale stood on the command deck, his eyes fixed on the holographic display showing the outer edge of the solar system and the faint red markers that meant incoming Drex scouts and every instinct, told him that whatever came next would decide if humanity had any chance at all. The crew around him moved with quiet urgency. Engineers running last-minute diagnostics, weapons officers checking and rechecking railgun calibrations, and in the far corner the communications chief monitoring a constant feed from Earth Command which was pouring every available piece of intelligence into Marcus's ear. The Drex were faster, stronger, and older in war than anything humanity had ever faced. But Marcus believed in one advantage: they didn't have unpredictability. Humans had never fought the way the Drex expected, and he intended to make that the one thing they could not counter as the first contact alert blared across the deck. The holographic display shifted to real-time visuals, and the Drex scouts appeared sleek and black like knives against the stars with an eerie blue glow in their wake. Their movements were unnervingly precise, as if they were one mind rather than a fleet. The weapons, Officer whispered. They're smaller than I thought. Marcus shook his head. They're faster than you think and ordered evasive maneuvers as the Drex opened fire. The first energy blasts streaked past the hull and one clipped an escort frigate, tearing through its shields in seconds. The human fleet fired back railgun slugs and missile salvos, but the Drex ships seemed to dance between them, barely touched by the barrage. Marcus ordered the fleet to scatter into asteroid debris nearby using the field as cover. And from the Drex point of view, it must have looked like chaos. But inside that chaos was Marcus's trap. He had predicted the Drex would adjust their formation to pursue what they saw as a disorganized retreat, and as they did, he ordered hidden mines embedded in the asteroids to detonate the explosion, lit up the void fragments of rock slamming into Drex hulls, and for the first time their shields flickered. One Drex scout broke formation to recover, and Marcus seized the chance, directing all ships to focus fire. Railgun rounds ripped into its engines, and the alien ship burst into a spray of molten fragments. The bridge erupted in cheers, but Marcus's expression stayed cold. This was a single scout, and there were more coming within minutes. Long-range sensors screamed a warning. Larger signatures were appearing on the edge of detection. Drex reinforcements inbound in overwhelming numbers. Marcus sent a coded message to Earth Command. We can't hold this position. Falling back to Titan orbit, and the retreat began, but it was no simple flight. The Drex scouts pursued relentlessly, weaving between human ships, their weapons carving through armor in quick, brutal strikes. Marcus's second officer was thrown across the deck as a near hit rocked their hull, but the captain's voice remained calm, driving his crew to push the engines harder. Every ship that could still fire kept the Drex at a distance until the icy silhouette of Saturn loomed ahead, its rings casting pale light across the void. Titan came into view, a dark, golden sphere with human supply stations orbiting above it, and Marcus ordered all surviving ships into defensive formation around the largest station. The battle had cost them 3 ships destroyed and 4 heavily damaged. The medical bays were overflowing, and the reality of the fight settled over the crew. If these were just scouts, then the main Drex fleet would be unstoppable without something far more powerful. The engineers worked through the night, repairing hull breaches and patching shield emitters, while Marcus met with his senior officers in the war room, a hologram of the solar system spinning slowly between them. He told them the truth. The Drex were not here for negotiation or intimidation. They were here to erase Earth and everything in it. The only chance they had was to find a weakness and hit it before the full fleet arrived, as if on cue. the station's long-range array picked up something massive, entering the system. Its energy readings unlike anything human sensors had recorded before. Marcus didn't need the AI's analysis to know what it was. The Drek's main fleet was coming, and with it the kind of firepower that had already burned half. A galaxy. And while Earth Command scrambled to send reinforcements, Marcus stood at the viewport staring into the black. Knowing the next time they met the enemy, it wouldn't be scouts or skirmishes. It would be war on a scale. Humanity had never known, and if they failed, there would be no one left to send another signal for help. Beyond Neptune's pale shadow, the black curtain of space rippled with the arrival of the Drek's main fleet, a vast wall of ships stretching so far that human sensors struggled to map its edges, and each warship glowed faintly with the cold blue. Energy that had reduced countless civilizations to ash, and aboard the lead vessel, the Zirath Prime, the Drek's overlord regarded the solar system like a predator studying a trapped animal, his orders simple: erase. Earth remove the signal's source, and move on to the next conquest in the command deck of the human flagship. Vigilant Captain Marcus Hale watched the live data feed streaming in from deep space probes, and even though he had prepared his crew for this moment, the sheer scale of the approaching force struck like a silent punch. 300 confirmed enemy warships, multiple carriers and weapon signatures beyond known classification. Marcus turned to his officers and said without raising his voice, "We can't outgun them, but we can make them bleed before they reach Earth." That's when Earth Command authorized Operation Black Lance, a last resort strategy that had been locked away for decades because it involved weapons humanity swore never to use: neutron warheads, capable of stripping life without destroying structures, graviton collapse bombs that could tear open the fabric of space itself, and stealth missiles with warheads lined in experimental dark matter. Every person in the war room understood that. Deploying such weapons meant crossing a line that could never be uncrossed, but none of them spoke against it because the Dreks were a threat no one had imagined surviving. While preparations for Black Lance began, a faint signal appeared on Secure. Channels not from Earth but from deep space it was. Commander Lyra, the Coalition officer, whose desperate call had first reached Earth, she was alive. Rescued by a human stealth corvette sent ahead during the Titan retreat, and her ship docked with the Vigilant. Hours later, when she stepped onto the deck, her armor was scorched, and her eyes carried the weight of watching her world die. But her voice was steady when she said, "I know how to hurt them. The Dreks have a single point of failure there. Entire fleet is linked to the living core of the Zirath Prime. You destroy the mind, you break the chain." The room went silent as the implications sank in. The Zirath Prime was not just a ship, it was a fortress wrapped around a bioengineered brain, the size of a city, and it sat at the heart of the Drex formation, guarded by more firepower than anything humanity had ever faced. Marcus knew they would need a distraction, large enough to draw the Drex carriers away from their command ship, and he found it in the swirling ice clouds near Neptune. His plan was insane by human standards, but unpredictability was their one advantage, and so under cover of darkness and the planet's magnetic interference, the human fleet drifted into the gas clouds, while a small strike group led by Marcus and Lyra prepared to slip through enemy lines and reach the Zirath Prime. The trap was set when the first human missiles hit Drex supply ships hiding behind the fleet's flank. The explosions lit up the void, sending fuel pods spinning into the dark. The Drex broke formation to defend their logistics lines, just as Marcus predicted. Human heavy cruisers burst from Neptune's clouds, railguns firing in coordinated salvos, and for a moment it looked as if the impossible was happening. Drex warships fell one by one, caught off guard in the chaos, but the victory was temporary. Drex reinforcements surged back into formation, slamming the humans with devastating counterfire Marcus ordered. The distraction group to keep pressure on the enemy while his stealth wing pushed toward the command carrier every kilometer closer brought more danger, alien patrol ships weaving through the black hunting for intruders. The Vigilance stealth systems strained against the Drex's scanners, as Lyra stood at Marcus's side, guiding them toward the carrier's vulnerable docking bay. Then, without warning, the Zerath Prime opened a broad transmission in perfect translated English, the voice, deep and cold. "Humans, you are dust pretending to be fire. We have burned 100 worlds. Yours will be ash before your sun dies." The crew stared at the comm screens in silence, and Marcus only replied, "We'll see before cutting the channel." By the time the stealth wing reached the shadow of the Zerath Prime, the rest of the human fleet was being pushed back toward Saturn, heavy losses mounting, but Marcus knew there was no turning back. This was the moment to strike and either change the course of the war or end it entirely in failure. The shadow of the Zerath Prime swallowed the human strike wing as their ships drifted in its wake, engines throttled low to avoid detection. The alien carrier loomed like a floating continent in space, its black hull alive with shifting patterns of blue light that pulsed in rhythm with the massive bioengineered brain buried deep within its core. And Captain Marcus Hale stood at the viewport of the Vigilant, watching the monstrous vessel turn slowly against the stars, its presence radiating the same cold inevitability as a coming storm beside him. Commander Lyra studied the Drex patrol patterns, her voice low and tense. "Their escorts are disciplined, but they will not expect boarding they do. Not believe humans are reckless enough to try." Marcus smiled without humor. "We'll make them believe as the rest of the fleet held the line near Saturn's orbit." The Vigilant and two smaller corvettes slipped closer, using the carrier's own heat signatures to mask their approach. The docking bay ahead was guarded by two Drex frigates. Their hulls bristling with weapon pods and sensor dishes, Marcus ordered silent launch of plasma torpedoes. The twin bursts of white fire tore through the frigates before they could raise shields, clearing a path. The boarding pods were launched, seconds later slamming into the carrier's outer hull, their magnetic claws locking tight and charges cutting through Drex alloy in a shower of sparks and molten metal inside the airlock. Human Marines in dark exosuits poured through weapons, up visors flashing tactical readouts. The Drex warriors met them almost immediately, their armor black and faceless, their limbs longer and stronger than any humans. The first clash was brutal, zero gravity, making every movement a slow, deadly ballet. Railgun bursts punched holes through alien armor, while Drex plasma spears cut through human shields. The Marines advanced meter by meter, leaving a trail of floating debris that had once been enemies. Marcus and Lyra led the second wave, pushing deeper into the ship, guided by Lyra's knowledge of Coalition battle schematics. The corridors of the Zerath Prime were strange and unnerving. The walls pulsed faintly, as though the ship itself were breathing, and sometimes the floor shifted beneath their boots as if reacting to their presence. Drex resistance grew heavier. The closer they came to the core, the alien warriors fought with a coordinated fury. Impossible for independent soldiers because they were not independent. They moved like extensions of one mind, the mind they had come to destroy in the war room back on Earth. The president watched the live feed relayed from the Vigilant, her face pale as casualty. Numbers climbed, but she said nothing. Only gripped the table and listened to the sounds of war echoing through the comms. The turning point came when the strike team reached a massive circular chamber lit by streams of cold blue energy in its center. Suspended in a web of organic cables floated the brain the size of a skyscraper, its surface rippling with thoughts too alien to comprehend. It pulsed in slow beats, and each pulse made the lights across the ship flicker. Lyra whispered, "That's it, the heart." Marcus ordered the demolition team forward, but before they could arm the charges, the chamber filled with Drex elites larger and faster than any they had faced, their armor etched with glowing symbols of rank. The fight that followed was chaos railguns hammering plasma spears, slashing sparks, and blood drifting in weightless clouds. The humans were outnumbered, and the elites were relentless. Lyra was knocked back, her armor sparking as a spear tore through her shoulder. "Marcus, caught her and forced her behind cover firing until his rifle overheated. The demolition crew managed to plant the charges, but the timer was too short to escape with certainty. Marcus made the call, "Evacuate now. We've done what we came to." The team fell back, fighting through narrowing corridors. As Drek's warriors swarmed from all sides, the charges detonated with a deep shudder that ran through the ship's very bones. The brain convulsed its surface, tearing open in waves of psychic backlash. The lights of the Zerath Prime dimmed, then flared wildly across the battlefield outside. Drek's ships broke formation, their maneuvers faltering like a predator. Suddenly blinded human fleets still locked in battle saw their chance and pushed. Forward railguns and missile fire smashing through the disoriented enemy lines, but even crippled the Zerath. Prime did not die, its weapons still firing erratically and its escorts converging to shield it. Marcus and Lyra barely made it back to the Vigilant. Their armor scorched, their crew bloodied, as they launched away from the carrier. The Drek's fleet was in chaos, yet still dangerous, and over the comm came a voice none of them expected. A deep, resonant growl laced with fury. "You've cut the head, but the body will still crush you." And in the background, the sensors screamed warning of fresh Drek's reinforcements dropping out of warp to finish what their leader had started. The Vigilant shuddered as it broke from the shadow of the Zerath Prime, the blue glow of the dying command brain still pulsing faintly behind them, like the last heartbeat of a wounded predator. The strike had worked. Every Drek's ship in the system was moving with broken coordination, their formations jagged and clumsy, but Marcus Hale knew it wouldn't last. Without central control, the Drek's were scattered, yet their numbers still dwarfed the human fleet, and their sheer firepower could still crush Earth if they regrouped. On the bridge, Commander Lyra leaned heavily against a console, her wounded shoulder patched but bleeding through the sealant. "They'll recover faster than you think," she warned, her voice sharp with urgency. "You must finish them before they adapt." Marcus gave the order to transmit a full-spectrum message across every known channel to Coalition remnants, human fleets, and even Drek's ships still capable of receiving it. His voice carried steady and unflinching. "To all combatants, your leader is gone. Your chain is broken. Leave now and live, or stay and burn." The translation AI pushed the words in over a dozen alien dialects, broadcasting deep into the void. Across the chaos of space, something unexpected happened. A quarter of the Drek's fleet immediately broke off, their engines flaring in retreat, warships peeling away from the battle without a shot. But the others, the most fanatical, the most loyal, turned instead toward the human formation with renewed fury. The Zerath Prime, though crippled, lurched forward under emergency thrust, its weapons sputtering but still capable of tearing a cruiser apart in a single volley. In response, Earth Command unleashed the final reserves, every orbital defense, drone, every missile platform, and a wave of nuclear-armed carriers. The sky above Earth began to glow with the movement of steel and fire. From the far side of Saturn, the remnants of Project Aegis regrouped, battered ships sliding back into formation. Marcus rallied them with a single, hard truth. If they break through here, there's no one left behind us. We hold. Lyra stepped to his side with a data crystal in her hand, the Drek's fleet's structural schematics, stolen during the boarding. "This isn't just about holding," she said. "You still have one weapon they've never faced, your unpredictability. Use it!" Marcus studied the display, a wild idea forming in his mind. Instead of concentrating fire on the Drek's warships, he ordered his gunners to target the debris fields left from earlier battles. Each impact sent clouds of shrapnel and rock spinning through the battlefield, tearing through Drek's formations like invisible minefields. The alien ships, unused to navigating such chaos, collided with one another, shields sparking under the unexpected assaults. Human cruisers dove into the confusion, point-blank railgun shots punching holes through Drek's hulls. The Vigilants, Forward batteries burned hot, firing faster than the engineers liked, but Marcus refused to slow. "Push them," he ordered. "Don't give them a second to think." But the Drex answered with their own brutality. A wave of their assault craft broke through the flanks, smashing into a human carrier and ripping it apart in a blaze that lit the void. Another energy volley from the Zerath Prime tore the engines off a Coalition battleship, leaving it drifting helplessly. Every loss weighed heavy, but the momentum was shifting. Human and Coalition ships pressed harder, exploiting every slip in Drex formation. Above Titan, a formation of stealth bombers emerged from the moon's shadow, streaking toward the enemy with graviton collapse warheads. When the bombs detonated, the fabric of space rippled like a black tide, pulling Drex ships into a crushing singularity. Entire enemy squadrons vanished in seconds, their destruction visible even from Earth's night sky as distant flashes. But still, the Drex did not break completely. The fanatics kept coming, ships aflame, weapons firing even as their hulls tore apart. The Zerath Prime pushed deeper into the battle. Each shot, it fired a hammer blow against the human line. Lyra turned to Marcus, her voice grim. "If that ship survives, they will rebuild. End it now." The captain knew what she meant. The Vigilance. Last dark matter torpedo was loaded, one weapon powerful enough to punch through the crippled carrier's core. But the shot would require closing to near-suicidal range. He looked around the bridge at his exhausted crew, each one silently accepting what might come next, and gave the order. "Helm! Take us in!" The Vigilant surged forward through the wreckage and fire, slipping between dueling warships and incoming plasma bursts. Alarms screamed as shields collapsed, Drex weapons tearing at their hull. At 300 kilometers, Marcus locked the torpedo on the Zerath Prime's exposed breach where the brain had been struck. The launch was silent, a streak of dark light vanishing into the enemy's shadow. Seconds later, the core of the Zerath Prime erupted in a blinding flare, the shock wave tearing through nearby Drex ships and scattering the rest. The surviving Drex began to scatter in all directions, engines flaring in desperate retreat. A deep silence followed across the comms. Humanity had done it, but Marcus knew it wasn't over. Not yet. The largest surviving Drex warships were regrouping for one last strike, aiming not for the fleet, but for Earth itself, their engines burning hotter than ever. And for the first time in the war, Marcus felt it in his bones. This would end not in strategy, but in a final stand that would either save his world or see it burn. Above the blue curve of Earth, the sky was already burning as the last Drex warships came in fast, their hulls scarred and smoking, but their weapons still alive with deadly light, and from orbit, it looked as if black knives were carving through. The stars, each one aimed straight at the planet itself. Captain Marcus Hale stood at the command deck of the Vigilant, the smell of scorched metal still clinging to the air from their run on the Zerath Prime. His crew exhausted, bleeding, but unbroken. The enemy was fewer now, but each ship was a monster, armed with enough firepower to gut cities in seconds. And if even one broke through the orbital shield network, Earth would be scarred forever on the secure channel. President Taylor's voice came steady, but tight. "You stop them here, Marcus, no matter the cost." There was no hesitation in his answer. "Understood." The fleet around him began to form a defensive wall, a ring of steel and fire around the planet-human warship's side. By side with battered Coalition survivors, each ship positioning to block the incoming wave orbital platforms, lit up as missiles and railguns came online. Laser batteries spun to track the incoming threat, and the first Drex volley came in like a storm plasma fire tearing through the void, slamming into the front line. A human destroyer exploded in a sphere of white light fragments, spinning toward the planet's gravity well. But the gap was instantly filled by another ship, the Vigilance. Guns roared, every shot aimed to cripple engines before the Drex could dive deeper into the defense ring. Marcus moved them forward, taking point in the formation, knowing the enemy would aim for the strongest target. The Drex ships hit hard shields. flaring as railgun rounds punched into their armor, explosions ripping across their flanks, but still they came forcing the defenders back, meter by meter. The battle became a blur of fire and metal point defense guns cutting down incoming torpedoes. As coalition fighters swarmed around the larger ships, sacrificing themselves to draw Drek's fire. Lyra stood at Marcus's side, her arm bound in blood-stained fabric, her voice steady. "They're pushing for a gap over the Pacific." Marcus didn't hesitate, ordering the Vigilant to pivot hard engines, screaming as they intercepted the Drek spearhead. The collision of fleets was brutal, close-range barrages turning the Black into a storm of fire. Marcus watched the tactical map and saw what everyone else feared. The Dreks were forcing them into a slow collapse, dragging the defense ring apart until they could punch a corridor straight to the planet's surface. There was only one move left, one that had been whispered about in strategy. Rooms, but never executed: Operation Fury. A graviton bomb large enough to tear space itself apart. The device was already on board, locked behind layers of safety code. Using it would mean anything. Caught in its pull would be crushed to atoms, including any defending ships within range. Marcus opened the secure channel to Earth Command, authorize Operation Fury. The reply came after only a second. Authorized. The coordinates were fed into the Vigilance nav systems, targeting the heart of the Drex formation. It meant diving straight into them. Point blank, to make sure they couldn't escape the blast radius. The crew didn't need to be told what that meant. Every face on the bridge set in grim determination. The Vigilance surged forward. Weaving through wreckage, incoming fire, lighting up its hull, the Drex formation reacted instantly. Shifting to concentrate fire on the charging human ship shields, dropped to nothing, the armor peeling away under the assault. But still they pushed on until the graviton device was in position. Marcus locked the activation code, turned to Lyra, and simply said, "For every world they burned." And she answered, "For every world." The device detonated not in an explosion of light, but in a collapse of the universe itself. Space twisted inward like water, draining into a black hole. Drek's ships closest to the blast were crushed in an instant, their hulls folding in on themselves. Larger warships were dragged screaming into the singularity, their weapons firing wildly as they died. The shockwave rippled out, knocking smaller ships into chaotic spins. The surviving